in the Echo Hawk home.
I personally believe in like a cultural and spiritual call to doing this kind of art.
Each stitch.
I did these handprints in the color of the native medicine wheel.
Each shade.
Red is the color of prayer.
Comes with a story.
It's also a symbol of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls movement.
And sometimes a reminder about the plan.
These kids, along with my own, they know that if their aunties or their mom ever went missing, that we would never have left them on purpose.
It's a plan Abigail Echo Hawk of the Seattle Indian Health Board says every Native woman she knows has had to make, what her family should do if she were to disappear.
They would need to make sure that somebody looked for us. For my children, they know that my handprints are on the dresses. They know that they would be able to take my fingerprints to the police. Do you ever remember not knowing about this?
No. We can be in danger. People get lost by not telling people where they are and not being careful. They don't come home and you don't get to be with your family anymore.
Here in Washington, Indigenous people are going missing or being murdered at the second highest rate in the country. Seattle itself ranks as the city with the highest number of cases nationwide. According to the Seattle Indian Health Board, compared to white women, Indigenous women in Washington are 4 times more likely to go missing. Right now, State Patrol records show 126 Indigenous people in the state who aren't accounted for.
Research has shown us that the primary perpetrator of the acts of violence against Indigenous women and girls are white men, predominantly white men who come onto reservations or target Indigenous women within urban settings.
With fewer resources, Native American families are forced to take matters into their own hands and form plans for their loved ones.
I've actually posted something on Facebook. If I ever go missing, know that I didn't do it on purpose. Come look for me. I love my family and friends. I wouldn't just disappear.
Nana Bluen has spent the past 2 years looking for her own sister, 39-year-old Mary Johnson. Mary was last seen on the Tulalip Reservation on Thanksgiving 2020.
We don't want her flame to go out, so we're trying everything we can to keep her name and face out there.
Mary's sisters, Nona and Jerry, believe she may have been a victim of human trafficking.
Yeah, what do you tell your kids about where she is?
I just say, Aunt Mary's trying to find her way home. And our eldest daughter, she goes like this all the time. You know, and she's like, Mom, can we email the chief and ask where she is? Mom, why aren't they looking for her? You know, how come she's not home yet? She can't be that lost. And I don't want to tell them that she's missing. So that's what I tell them.
Fire Trail Road. This is the road what Mary was seen walking on the day she went missing. We believe that she trusted somebody, got in a vehicle, and has never been seen since.
Tulalip Police Chief Chris Sutter sees Mary's case as a continuation of what's been happening to Indigenous people in America for centuries.
Historically, the wrongs that have been committed, including abductions and murders and rapes and all forms of sexual assaults and other types of abuses, have gone unpunished and unprosecuted. This has been perpetuated for centuries.
And it's because of that history, Chief Sutter has talked to his own children about the plan.
My children have all heard Dad preach to them, be aware of their surroundings and their situation, and don't trust people.
I wanted to do this in honor of the families.
Back in the Echo Hawk home.
Do you guys know that? We would never leave you.
Mm-hmm.
Abigail hopes future generations won't need to prepare for their own abductions or murder by having a plan.
Having a plan is part of the hopelessness that's experienced by our communities. It's not something any of us should have to do.
Until then, Abigail creates hope from unlikely sources, like these flowers on her latest art piece.
And really thinking about every single person as a blossom, as beloved life.
When the Seattle Indian Health Board asked for PPE during the pandemic, the federal government sent them these body bags instead.
How many body bags do you have?
Got like 22 left.
22 body bags?
Now Abigail uses them to create art that highlights the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. One of her works made from these body bags has even been featured in Vogue.
My artwork is a form of healing.
She's also now using them to keep the traditions of her culture alive for the next generation.
It's cool because most people are not able to be a part of the culture.
The thing I love about it is that for these kids, this is just who they are. It's going to be pretty.
Creating hope and beauty from darkness.
There's hope on healing the past so that we have full healing for our community so their children's children don't experience the same things that I did, that they did, where something like this is never out of a body bag again. I refuse to let the hopelessness be all the conversation.
If you have information on Mary Johnson's case or any other missing Indigenous person case, contact the Seattle FBI office. We have a full list of those missing, along with information on how you can pass along tips on our website, king5.com. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa.
Welcome. We're the Lactamish people.
On the shore of the Salish Sea.
These are the native waters of Quethalmachan, Orcas.
Members of the Lummi Nation and others pray for the return of someone they consider family. A southern resident orca that was captured from these waters more than 50 years ago.
This is her home, not in Miami in a cement tank. That's not where she belongs. We ache for our relative. So it was important today to gather to send prayers to Skelly Chuktanut to let her know we're coming for her.
The Lactamish people call her Skelly Chuktanut. But here in Miami, where she's been held in captivity for the last 50 years, she's Lolita. She's legal property of the Miami Seaquarium.
When you are close to her, you can feel the sadness that she's just hanging on. It is just taking a lot longer than we'd ever hoped.
Skelly Chuktanut's story begins in 1970, around the time King 5 began investigating orca captures in Puget Sound.
We had aircraft flying over the San Juans to spot them, boats with explosives to separate the adults from the babies.
It was during one of these captures, Skelly Chuktanut was violently taken from her family in Washington's Penn Cove. She was just 4 years old.
They only wanted the babies. She is the longest living orca in captivity. When she was brought to a pen on the dock by the harbor, she was crying. Her mother was crying. People around Penn Cove, the older people can still hear the cries, the screams.
The whole capture itself, how traumatizing would that have been?
Terribly traumatic. Pain on the side of their heads when those bombs are going off.
Howard Garrett, co-founder of the Orca Network, showed us photos from some of those whale captures in the early 70s.
The older females would gather around the young ones and try to protect them. They knew what was happening.
Since her capture, Skelly Chuktanut has lived mostly alone here at the Miami Seaquarium.
It's shallow. There's nowhere in her tank that's deep enough that she can dive.
Ellie Kinley and Raynell Morris are Lummi tribe members who have visited Skelly Chuktanut in Miami.
You know you're not alone.
You'll see that there's 2 umbrellas for the trainers that are working with her, but yet there's no shade for her.
According to a 2021 inspection report, she's fed poor quality rotten food. The water in her tank is dirty, and her trainers disregarded veterinary instructions to make her perform despite injuries.
This is an extreme case of torture and abuse. She's been treated very, very badly by a lot of the staff.
In March, the Dolphin Company purchased the Miami Seaquarium. As a condition of the sale, the company had to retire Skelly Chuktanut. For now, she remains in Miami. The company did not return our request for comment.
She has now gone from the corporate books from an asset to a liability. So that's a huge incentive for them to come to the table and want to partner with us.
Scully Chucktonut's advocates are working to get an independent veterinarian to assess her condition and determine whether she could safely make the 3,000-mile journey back home.
It's been done since the 1960s. Hundreds of times orcas have been transported by plane.
First, Scully Chucktonut would be coaxed into a custom-made stretcher and lifted out of her Miami aquarium with a crane. The 20-foot, 7,000-pound orca would then be lowered into a small container not much bigger than herself, filled with ice water to prevent overheating. From there, she'll be loaded onto a cargo plane for a 6-hour trip to the Bellingham airport. Next, onto a barge, which will transport her to her ancestral waters in the Salish Sea. Her new home will look very different than the cement aquarium she's spent the last half-century in. The plan, created in collaboration with wildlife researchers and marine mammal veterinarians, calls for a netted underwater pen, 250 feet long, 100 feet wide, and 30 feet deep in fresh ocean water.
The scent of the cedar brings the salmon home. And that scent travels across the water to her. She's home. It's calling her home, like it calls the salmon home.
Here at home and in Miami, a special call from her family.
And when we went to Miami in 2020, we brought our cedar with us to put it in to the water outside of her tank. So Scully Chucktonut would smell that cedar. Scully Chucktonut! And know that's home. Scully Chucktonut! She's 56. She has 37 plus beautiful years left of her life. When she comes home, she'll feel comforted. Her struggle's over. I can see it.
On the horizon, advocates hope for a reunion. A half-century in the making.
Our cedar itself, when it's ready to carve, it will give itself to us.
In her Shelton studio, art is a language that speaks to Andrea Wilbur-Saigo.
It's always been told we didn't have a written language, but this is it.
Each nudge, each nick, a dialect.
It's all of our history, art in every one of those art pieces.
From fashion runways to fleece blankets, for decades, corporate America has plastered Native American art and design all over their products. But consumers may not know that very little of that mass-produced work is done by real Native artists, like Andrea.
I've been beat out by quite a few non-Native artists for good jobs. I would have to say they get better prices than we do.
In 1990, Congress created the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Under the law, if you're representing or selling your work as Native and it's not, you're committing a federal crime. Instead, you have to be honest and say the work is Native-inspired or Native style.
This is a law that does not have the teeth that it should have to protect the legitimate Indian arts and crafts industry.
Seattle-based Indigenous rights lawyer Gabe Galinda says in 2022, the act is outdated and lacks accountability.
What enforcement is in the act?
It appears that's what's missing, but there has to be some process by which the question is being asked. Are you Indigenous? Is your art Indigenous? And if you say you are and you say it is, can you please show us the proof?
The penalties for misrepresenting Native art are steep, a $250,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. But it's not enough to stop everyone. That's Louis Anthony Rath, aka Tony Rath on Instagram, creating work federal investigators say he illegally passed off as authentic at places like Pike Place Market. Prosecutors have charged him with violating the Indian Arts and Crafts Act.
These acts operate to displace Indigenous artists from their craft, their livelihood, and from the economy that they deserve to have a place in.
Ripping off Native American artwork is a multi-million-dollar business. Take a look at some of these knockoffs confiscated by investigators. In 2016, law enforcement seizures in New Mexico and California uncovered $35 million in counterfeit art. And it's a crime that has an international reach. The U.S. Department of Justice recently charged 8 people with smuggling in this jewelry that appeared to be Native American, but the items were actually knockoffs smuggled in from the Philippines.
What type of person does that? Knowingly misrepresents themselves, a whole cultural identity to sell art. Who does that?
I think people think it's an easy way just to make some money. This whole store is about Native people who are inspired and are creating this beautiful art.
The CEO of the company 8th Generation, Colleen Echohawk, says she didn't know it, but even here at a shop dedicated to Native American art, they sold a counterfeit item.
So we did find one of the men that was charged with violating the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. He did sell here several years ago. We found on his Instagram page, he mentioned this store. Were you aware of that?
I was made aware of that. And it was because of that instance that we started collecting tribal identification and asked people to show us, their enrollment cards in their tribe so that we can ensure that the art that we are putting out there is going to go back to the Native community and see prosperity for Native people and Native artists.
But pretty much until this is done, this is where I live, is out here in the shop.
Back in Andrea Wilbur-Saigo's Shelton studio, she says there's another problem with the law.
I will change this federal law in my lifetime.
If she or any other Native artist allows a non-Native person to help with the creation, under current law, that too has to be labeled Native style or inspired work. Andrea says she could really use help from her mother, who's also a carver. But since her mother is not Native, that's not possible.
Now you're telling me I have to market my work the same as any other non-Native person. We should be able to say it's Native, it's ours. It's cultural, it's spiritual, it comes from the roots that we were all born from, and nobody can clip those roots. The only thing this law does is harm Native people from succeeding.
In a few weeks, Andrea's biggest dream, her latest work, will find a permanent place in downtown Seattle.
It's Grandmother Frog. She's 21 feet.
A welcome figure that authentically speaks the unique language of this land.
It's our written history, our future, and our present. Without it, we lose a big part of our soul on where we've came from and where we're going. Yep, we haven't went anywhere. We're not going anywhere.
If you're in the market for Native American artwork, ask for proof that the piece was created by a Native artist. That could include things like the artist's biography or information about their tribal affiliation. And remember, watch out for words like Native inspired or Native style. Those pieces could be created by anyone. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa.
Just want to say prayers. We go into there.
The scent of burning sage carries a prayer for the Bulltail family.
As we start this day, we just ask Creator to help us to find Shaulina.
For 4 days, the search for 31-year-old Shaulina May Bulltail,
if she's in here, we want her to see you,
has led her family and advocates to several homeless encampments.
You guys see her today?
I see her all the time.
Yeah?
The Idaho native moved to Seattle with a boyfriend in 2017 and soon lost touch with her family.
I think that she got into the drug scene. The last couple messages she had left her dad were just absolutely unbelievable. They didn't make any sense. About a year ago, he stopped getting any messages, any calls.
Wednesday, the family got their first glimpse of Shaulina after more than 5 years.
She's got pockmarks all over her face. She screamed and said, "This lady's crazy, help." But then, I don't know, a few seconds later, she turned around and told me she loved me.
Watch out for needles.
The unhoused that live here call this area near the I-5 and I-90 interchange the jungle. It's one of Seattle's long-standing encampments.
Can you guys wait right here? And you all recognize Bree?
Roxanne White, founder of the grassroots organization Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, People, and Families.
That's what they're saying, King Street, and then over there by Yesler again.
Has a unique understanding of what Shaulina and her family are up against.
I used to be homeless, and I'm a trafficking survivor, and I was out on the streets, and I know the kind of things that happen out here, and I know firsthand just what I survived, and I can't imagine, and then I can, which breaks my heart to know that she's walking around with no shoes, and that she never wears shoes.
Seattle police tell us Shaulina is not considered missing. In an email, police confirm they've had prior contacts with Shaulina over the years and even made a past referral for evaluation.
This child, this woman, this young lady is incapable of even asking for help. So that leaves the family to bear this burden on their own. The heartbreaking thing is who do we call? I mean, there's nobody to call. There's nobody to come aid us. There's gaps in the system. Do you know where she might be right now?
She's around.
She's around? Is she in this camp right now?
Last time I seen her was on that road.
As close as the searchers get, Shaulina remains just out of reach, much like the resources they desperately need to get her home. Last year, an out-of-state tribal court granted Shaulina's mother guardianship over her so she could be committed for treatment. However, an Indigenous rights lawyer tells us it's unlikely the tribal order is enforceable in Washington.
I've done everything in a mother's power to save my child, and I've fought against the system now for a while, which means my words mean nothing to them, and that's not okay. It's not okay.
A plea for help that Roxanne, a once missing Indigenous woman herself, hopes to answer.
I think it's so important that we try to come in and do what we can so that she doesn't become one of our MMIW that never makes it home. This is why I survived everything. This is why I survived. It was to help other families.
This is roughly the 6th search Roxanne has organized as part of her work with the families of missing and murdered Indigenous people. She says she desperately needs volunteers and donations to continue to raise awareness around this ongoing crisis. To find out how you can help, go to our website, king5.com. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa.
For months, our Facing Race team has been looking into why Washington State and Seattle specifically have some of the highest numbers of missing Indigenous people in the country.
It is a crisis that Washington State will now be the first to address with a new statewide alert system. PJ Randhawa explains how it works and how it could help.
Right now, there are 128 reports of missing Indigenous people in Washington, but advocates and investigators say there are likely more cases that haven't been reported. Part of the problem is there hasn't been much help or attention. The hope is this new alert system will change that.
On your phone and on the road, starting July 1st, Washingtonians will start seeing missing persons alerts specifically about Indigenous people. It's called the Missing Indigenous Person Alert, or MIPA. While Indigenous people make up less than 2% of Washington's population, studies show Indigenous women are 4 times more likely to go missing than white women and face murder rates more than 10 times the national average.
We just want to be heard. We want to know that our lives matter, and we want to be found. And that's what this alert system does at the end of the day.
Representative Deborah Knockoff, the only Indigenous woman in Washington's House of Representatives, says the alert will streamline tribal and local police jurisdiction issues, which have historically hampered missing persons investigations.
No, I'm not so alone that I won't sit in my house and wonder why no one's helping me find my daughter and why there's no police. They will contact the local police, the state police, and now the broadcast will go out in my local area.
Here's how it works. When a person is reported missing to tribal or local police, the investigator on the case now has the option to ask Washington State Patrol to issue an alert.
How do you decide who gets an alert?
Is it an imminent danger situation, and would activation of that alert assist in the recovery? As law enforcement, we kind of have to make that decision. Sometimes it's a tough decision. So this is an example of what the flyer is going to look like.
Once activated, you could see the MIPA alert on highway signs, social media, and on WSP's Twitter page.
When we put these flyers together, we'll be adding photos of the missing person and any associated vehicles.
The MIPA alerts won't be as visible as Amber alerts, but that could change by the end of the year.
Future technology will allow us to geographically target the alerts.
Representative Knockoff says the MIPA alert model could soon be replicated in Canada and across across the U.S.
We're getting responses from the attorney generals across the state, across all the states.
For those still searching for missing loved ones like the family of Mary Johnson, the alert is welcome news that they say could have made all the difference.
Do you think something like that would have helped?
If this was back when Mary first was reported missing, of course, I believe she probably would have been found.
The alert system does something very simple for us as Native American women. It takes the hand away from the mouth so you can hear the unheard screams.
King 5 will be broadcasting those MIPA alerts. It's part of our commitment to help end the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people in our state. To sign up for the alert, text the word ALERT to 206-448-4545 and we'll send you a link. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa. The sale of fake Native American art has been a problem in Washington and here at Pike Place Market. Late last year, 2 Western Washington artists were charged with selling counterfeit art, some of it here at the market. Now, one business here is using TikTok as a way to educate consumers about how to tell the real from the fake.
Cultural appreciation is fine.
At 8th Generation, conversations about cultural appropriation are a lot lighter than you may expect.
This is a work of art. This is bullshit. This is a work of art. This is bullshit.
We're having great fun educating people about being that ethical consumer.
CEO Colleen Echohawk says the store's TikTok videos run the gamut from funny to serious.
When you profit off of elements from a culture that is not yours, whether that's economically or socially, that's cultural appropriation.
But always educational at heart.
We've done some TikToks where we have just shown people like, hey, this is a piece of Native art or jewelry and we want you to wear it and you should wear it and you shouldn't be afraid of cultural appropriation when you buy it from an authentic Native artist. You're born for the camera, Gianni.
These quick videos made by staff at the Native-owned business have found a huge audience on TikTok, surpassing more than 1 million views.
What we're seeing on TikTok, the people that are watching us over and over and over again, and our TikToks are going super viral, is because it's a group of folks who want to be educated about what they're buying. They want to make ethical choices. And so we are the perfect place if you want to be making an ethical choice and being a conscious consumer.
Echohawk says 8th Generation has strict protocol to ensure everything for sale here is made by a Native artist.
You can go all around the store and you'll see bios of our artists because that is the way you can be sure that that artist is asking you to please support the Native community, support their business, support Native entrepreneurship.
Show it all.
I believe that Native art is part of the way that we're going to heal as a community.
If you come across a piece of Native artwork or design that you're interested in buying, you may want to ask about the artist to verify that the piece is authentic. One term to look out for is Native inspired. Those pieces can be made by anyone. At Pike Place Market for Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa. The new Chief Seattle Al Café in the heart of Pioneer Square will be introducing traditional Indigenous foods in a modern cafe setting. The cafe is owned and operated by the nonprofit Chief Seattle Club, and 100% of the profits go back into the organization. The cafe will feature authentic Indigenous recipes and ingredients from various regions across the country, like Great Plains bison and Northwest salmon. One of the cafe's largest goals is to promote the acceptance and visibility of Indigenous foods and culture.
Food is extremely personal for Native folks. I mean, it's directly tied to a lot of our origin stories and our identities. Our bodies remembers and our soul remembers, and we're able to start to peel back some of those layers of genocide and colonization and heal, both from a spiritual level but also from a physical level.
The cafe itself is also a visual feast of authentic Native artwork, curated specifically for this space.
I wanted this mural to kind of, again, identify the change of worlds from a traditional Native world, which is on the left side, and he's the pivotal piece, identifying a change of world to a new world where we live in a city, but we still have many elements of our culture still around us.
The cafe will officially open to the public on Tuesday, November 29th. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randawa.